Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here among so many amazing educators. Thank you to the Buck Institute for bringing me here to this beautiful Napa. I'm sure everyone is enjoying their time here. So let me start with a simple, they are what we make them. And when we think about our students, we think about our classrooms, our schools, our districts. What do we want the end product to look like? How do we want them to come out? And so I start with a little bit about me. I grew up in Boyle Heights in East Los Angeles. I grew up poor. Those are some pictures of me, and we didn't even notice the tagging. We were just there. I was proud to be a kid. I was having fun with my siblings, fun with everyone else. I didn't know any different. I was being really innovative. We made a swing with a rope, a pillow. Hey, that's pretty good, right? And I loved everything about my culture. I danced folklorico. I was part of everything. Everyone there spoke Spanish. I spoke Spanish. I didn't even really need to speak English. And everyone just made you feel welcomed, even though there were some hang-ups in the neighborhood. We shopped at places like the Mercadito, where you could buy snakeskin boots and all the ingredients for tamales, all in the same place. You can buy everything from Mexican candy to the belts and everything. It felt like a little place in Mexico, right there at home. But everyone around me was just like me. I didn't know anything different. And so our little one-bedroom home, where we all slept on 2 beds pushed together, it was our version of the California King. And we were happy. We were fine. But then on the flip side, when you grow up with parents like this, and you grow up in a neighborhood where dad has to be one of the highest-ranking gang members, on the upside, you're protected. No one's going to mess with you when your dad's like that, right? But at the same time, you're also going to run into challenges because there is going to be a lot of violence. There's going to be gunshots. There's going to be a lot of helicopters. And all of those little things you start to think about as a kid. When you hear the gunshots, are they pointed at my dad? Or you're trying to walk to school and you see fighting. Well, what does that mean? So school really became that safe haven for me. Because even for just those 6 hours, teachers and administrators made all that disappear. They made the difference between me feeling like a confident kid and me hiding behind everything or falling into the circumstances that I lived in. And school did that. Teachers did that. They made all the difference in the world, even if it was just for a little bit. And so let me introduce you to my 5th grade teacher, Ms. Hirschkoff, because Ms. Hirschkoff changed everything for me. She was the only teacher who ever came to visit our sardine can of a house because she knew that parent involvement was a big key to success. She saw something in me back then in 5th grade. She put me in my first speech contest. Who knew that I'd be up here, right? But she saw that as a 5th grader. I was like, okay. I only won 2nd place, but I was like, oh, all right. But she knew that there was something about us, all of these kids, that they needed an extra push. She didn't have to stay after school, go to my house, talk to my mom, make sure she made phone calls, follow-ups. She didn't have to do any of that, but she did. And in that school, I blossomed into this amazing student who was just confident, was willing to take risks, wanted new challenges. And then it was going to be time to go to middle school. And the middle schools in my neighborhood still had not figured out how to make kids confident learners. Elementary school was doing really well, but the middle schools, they were losing it somewhere. There was a lot of gang activity in those schools, a lot of teacher turnovers. Teachers didn't want to work there. A lot of substitutes, day to day. So between my mom and my teacher, they decided they were going to send me to school an hour and a half away from where I lived, to the rich side of town, because those schools had everything together. There were no gang fights. There were after-school programs, everything from art to sports. You name it, they had it. And they offered them for free. Wow, what a novel idea. And so there I was, on a school bus, to the opposite side of town. When I first looked at those neighborhoods, you see my little house with the boards on the windows, and then you see the other houses. I was like, wow, these houses exist? I've only seen those on TV. I didn't know people lived like that. I had no clue. But the part that I didn't know, I knew it was going to be a little bit of a culture shock when I got there, okay. But what I didn't know was that the only way that I was able to go to school over there was because my school district had lost a lawsuit. And they were forced. It was mandatory integration of schools. I didn't know that. And so when I got to school, there were not a lot of happy folks to see brown kids or a bunch of kids from the ghetto coming into their schools. But what fault did I have that policymakers thought that that was going to be the equalizer? I was just a kid. What fault did I have that my mom was doing everything she possibly could, but we were still poor? I was just a kid. And what fault did I have that I wanted an amazing education and my neighborhood could not provide that? I was just a kid. And so teachers there, some of them were supportive and some not so much. And they hinted at that difference of expectation. And they came subtly in class when everyone was going to do the big science project, and they said, Pearl, don't worry, we'll give you an alternative assignment. Why did I need an alternative assignment? Why was I not up for the challenge? Why could I not create something amazing? They're like, well, it might cost too much. I can't use cardboard. I have plenty of that at home. You know? And it was little things like that. Or maybe I scored higher than some of the other students on a test, and they were like, well, did someone else give you the answers? What? No, I studied. I read. My mom makes me every single day. And then those little hints became loud and clear. We were on a field trip to Pepperdine University to go see tide pools. And as a little girl, you see this beautiful university, and you're like, wow, what is that? And they were like, well, that's Pepperdine University. I was already picturing myself sitting there on the lawn, reading my book with the ocean, waves. I was like, this is where I want to go. This is the perfect university for me. And my teacher said, what? Kids like you don't go to school there. Talk about killing the daydream. I was like, wait, what do you mean kids like me? And then I thought, oh, yeah, he's met my parents already. I understand what you mean by kids like me. Now, I could have used that as a complete just deterrent and said, forget it. But instead, I kind of kept that in the back of my head and was like, all right, kids like me. Well, what does that mean? And so the next couple years, I really tried to figure out, what are kids like me? What does that mean for a daughter of a gang member, but at the same time, a daughter of a working mom who was doing everything possible? And so struggling to find the balance, was I going to be that college-going student, or was I just going to fall into the trap that everyone expected me to? No one would expect anything more if I did become a gang member. If I did get pregnant at 15, oh, she's just another one. But I knew that I had to do something different. And what was school doing to help me? Nothing. I bounced around to quite a few different schools in middle school, and some teachers, they did everything they possibly could to try to get me to do things in a different way. And I have to admit, I acted like I didn't care. And I acted like what they were saying meant absolutely nothing. And I think as educators, we see that a lot. Our kids, we don't know how much of an impact we're having. We don't get to see the result of our efforts until sometimes way later, if at all. But you know what? I was listening. I was paying attention to everything they were saying to me. And I remembered the teachers who stood up for me. I remembered the teachers who tried and the teachers who didn't. And I knew that I wanted to be that. I wanted to be one of those teachers who tried, even if it just felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And sometimes it does feel that way, where you're spinning your wheels in the mud and you're like, oh, this isn't working. But it does. I'm here because it does. And so in high school, I was still struggling with this identity issue. Who was I going to be? And I attended a school where there were 2 programs on there. One was called the magnet school. These are supposed to be college-bound students who are highly academic. And then you have the regular school, which is just kind of everyone else. Well, the entire campus, 99% Latino, everyone from the same neighborhood. So how do they decide who gets a shot at success and who doesn't? And it didn't come down to until my senior year. I wanted to get into the advanced placement English class. And my teacher said, no, you're not going to get into that class because you have a chip on your shoulder. It's like, well, kind of. I'll do that. And she's like, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and you're not going to get to have everything you want. I was like, everything I want? I was like, you have no idea how I live. It's like, wow, okay. And she was the only teacher in the magnet program, which meant that if I wanted to take that class, I'd have to go to the regular school. I was like, all right, fair enough. Go to the regular school. Wow, night and day. Magnet school, 25 students, tons of resources to pass that AP exam, that advanced placement exam after. Regular school, 40 students in that class, and 0 resources. You're talking the exact same campus. So I asked my teacher, Miss Roth, I was like, why don't we have any of the books that magnet kids have? She's like, oh, because no one expects you to pass the test. They just want to say they gave you the class. Oh, okay. More inequity. Why? So there were 10 of us in that class. We called ourselves the magnet rejects. We're like, okay. So I figured I'm going to march myself into the magnet office and say, there's 10 magnet students. I want 10 copies of everything. Then we can share and figure it out. Well, the magnet coordinator was like, well, why? What? I don't understand. Why would you want? Because I want 10 copies. Because I want to pass this test. We need a chance too. That's not fair. And she's like, well, how many kids are in your class? 40. She's like, I'll give you copies for everyone then. Wow. I was like, really? I was like, nice, small victory. So I go back and I'm like, we have books. And I think what I learned more about that particular moment was that I could be the advocate for kids like me. And that kids like me needed somebody to fight for them, to speak up and say, this is not fair. We deserve the same chance as everyone else. Don't start us 10 steps behind everybody and then think that we're going to be able to catch up, and then when we don't, you judge us. That's not fair. So I knew then that I had to teach. I had to go into the classroom. And of course, what other university was I going to go to than Pepperdine? I had to. It was the only school I applied to. My mom was like, well, don't you need a plan B? Oh, there is no plan B. It is Pepperdine, and that's where we're going. And I thought that getting into Pepperdine was going to be the toughest part Oh no, getting out. That was even tougher. Because then when I realized, when I was there, that now I'm going to school with kids from other countries, kids from all across the nation. And even though I graduated with honors at the top of my class, that wasn't good enough. Why is it that my school did not prepare me at the same level of someone else at some other school? And so I lived in tutoring labs. I was constantly studying because I didn't come in at the same level as everyone else. But I was determined to leave at the same level as everyone else. And so when I finally finished and I decided to go back to teaching or go into teaching, I knew that I wanted to go back to the school that I went to because I wanted to be that advocate and that voice of change. Now, I didn't go into teaching thinking that I was going to start a school or that I didn't at all. I really went into teaching going, just give me kids. I'll teach outside. I don't even need a classroom. Just let me teach. And so as I started my career, there was an amazing initiative that came about called Public School Choice. And the Los Angeles Unified School District launched this where anyone could apply for low-performing schools. And while everyone else was kind of freaking out, oh my God, anybody? Teachers were like, yes, anybody, that means us. So as a group of teachers, that's exactly what we did. We wrote our own proposal for our dream school. And what would that look like? Project-based learning, of course. And we knew that we wanted an environment where students felt like they were someone, like they belonged there. So our name alone, the San Fernando Institute for Applied Media, SFIM, we want our kids to know that I am someone. I am going to be the next engineer. And that hope that you bring with creating a school. And was it tough? Oh gosh, yes. And as teachers and educators, you know that this job is not a piece of cake. It takes hours and hours. But when you dream it and you get to actually do it and you live it, it is the most amazing experience to see a school transform. And that's what we did. We took a school that was low performing, where students were having trash can fires, where our lunches would get cut to 10 minutes because all staff would have to go out there. I mean, that's crazy. You have 1,600 students, and there was no accountability, no way to really keep track of students and meet families and get to know them, and there was no way of doing that. So when we created our school, we wanted to make sure that there would be a way. And this is where we are today. We started by changing the culture. How would we change this culture of just fighting and violence and not caring to a place where kids are going to try and kids are going to struggle and they're going to fail, but they're going to keep going? How do we do that? Well, first, you have to get them to trust you. And how do they trust you? You have to be vulnerable. And sometimes that's hard. You have to let them into you. And you have to allow yourself to make mistakes in front of them and teach them how you overcome that. You have to teach them about your story. None of us are immune to obstacles. None of us are immune to a struggle. Tell your kids what your struggle was so that they see that it's human, it's real, that they will not be immune to it either. That as they start to come to those obstacles, that there's hope. There's a chance of them working through it, getting past it, and doing something amazing. And they learn it from watching us. They learn it by watching the way we interact with colleagues. They learn it by watching the way we solve problems in our own schools and our own campuses. That's how they learn collaboration. That's how they learn how to problem solve, because they are listening to us. They are watching, and they are emulating. So what kind of example are we going to give them? Because we knew that we could have all the technology in the world, and it wasn't going to matter if our kids were not going to be receptive. And so 4 years later, we have changed our school culture. We do have a one-to-one iPad program, and students take these devices home because they become a family device. Because we're not just about trying to transform schools. We're trying to transform communities, entire communities, the next generation of movers and shakers. And that's what we want them to be. So with our school at SFIM, we make school fun. We have Pirate Day, National Pirate Day in September, just in case you want to embrace your inner Buccaneer, September 19th. And we make sure that we have activities for them to do during lunch times, after school. Make sure we provide them with sports and arts and music and technology and everything that brings them back into school, because we know that that's where the transformation happens. That's where we light those fires, where they're going to do something greater than themselves. This year was the first year that our leadership class decided that it was time that they honor our staff and teachers. They planned an entire surprise assembly. So they made certificates for all staff, all volunteers, parents, after-school tutors, everyone on campus that has anything to do with anything, office staff, they made a certificate for. They made the banners. They organized it all. They even made speeches. Just the way that we would do for them, they decided that it was their turn. And so imagine, these are 8th graders, 7th and 8th graders, organizing themselves for something bigger. So who knows? Maybe they're going to be the next ones organizing a human rights march. Maybe they will be the next policymakers organizing leaders to make decisions. Because that's what we want our kids to do. We want them to be empowered, to be able to be the next movers and shakers of our world. And we can do that because they are what we make them. And if we make them to be change agents, they will be. But if we crush them, or we don't even give them a chance from the very beginning, then how can we expect anything different? And when we do this, it takes an entire campus. It cannot be done in isolation. Teachers, we can't do it alone. Administrators, you can't do it alone. Superintendents, you can't do it alone. It takes everyone, all of the different pieces, working together, working in collaboration, talking, sharing ideas, finding solutions, because it's not going to happen in 1 year. Transformations like this do not happen just like that. They take time and patience and energy, and you have to be able to sustain that momentum, that level of enthusiasm with staff, and it's tough. It really is. I'm not going to say that, oh, it's been just sunshines and rainbows, but it's doable, and the end product is just amazing to see. And so as you go through this week, I know you've been inspired by others, and we need to remember that we are the cultivators of intellectual curiosity. And we must empower our students to ask questions when they don't understand, to challenge information because they do, and to create change because they can. And so with that, they are what we make them. So thank you so much for having me here today.